Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Rough Monday today, Dr. Paul, wasn't it? Yeah, unfortunately. Apologize to our viewers.
We got to get back in the swing of things and get all our equipment in the swing of things.
Yeah.
But we are here, and we will move along and do our best to report on our least favorite doctor in the country, and that's, we will talk a little bit about Fauci. He still gets on every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I bet you, if you added up the amount of free advertisement that guy got, it has to be in the many, many millions. But I want to start off with a report, from Germany, the Robert Koch, I guess, but not related to the Koch brothers here. And it has to do with a study they did, which is really fascinating. 95% of the Omicron cases are in vaccinated people.
Yeah.
So does that mean the vaccination might not be working very well? And that is probably, the case. But this is just tremendous numbers, and it's at a point where they want to, they should back off on some of this stuff. At the same thing, we hear, and hopefully we get to talk a little bit more about it, that Fauci, last week said, maybe you only need 5 days of quarantine, which, medically speaking and scientifically speaking, I don't know what the big difference is. But anyway, 5 days, sounded like, at least they made it shorter. They didn't make it 20 days. But guess what? They're announcing today, I guess Fauci said yesterday, 5 days might not be enough, so we have to do it until they make sure they have a negative test as well. So they do so in that sense, the whole principle of the quarantine didn't work either. The vaccine didn't work, the quarantine didn't work, and yet there's no real challenge to the stature of Dr. Fauci.
Yeah. Well, Walensky and Fauci admitted that the change to the quarantine from 10 to 5 days was not based on any science. There was no new study that said 5 days is better than 10. They said this is what we view the American people can bear. So it's a political opinion, has to do with the fact that we have a worker shortage, and that if you keep a bunch of workers out for 10 days, it's going to have a bad effect on the economy, and his boss Biden went like that. But let's put up this first clip if we can, because this is the Robert Koch Institute, which is basically the equivalent of the NIH in Germany. I don't know if we have that first clip, but this is a new study they did. It comes out periodically, and it has found that, as you say, 90+% of the people that are having 95.58% of the Omicron cases in Germany are fully vaccinated. 28% of those had a booster, and only 4.42% are unvaccinated. And I went and looked at the study, and you can easily look it up here. But that's the reason why I think we're theming this show, is that the narratives are imploding, because we heard Biden over and over say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We heard Walensky, we heard Fauci, pandemic of the unvaccinated. But that simply isn't the case. And the Germans, who have suffered hardest under these lockdowns, are seeing it. And in fact, just look at that next clip if we can. This is also a recent poll out of Germany. Hardly any confidence left in Germany. Only 32% of the people believe that the COVID figures provided by the government are correct. And let's look at the next. I'm going to just do one more quick one. And this is Denmark. 89.7% of people infected with Omicron in Denmark are either fully vaccinated or had their first booster. So what we're seeing is everything they said about this has proven to be false.
No big surprise, but onward they go, continuing to do the same thing. They admit these people and they make the diagnosis, which is shaky stuff anyway, because we know the tests aren't very reliable. And they make all these assumptions, and they change things around, change their opinions almost on a daily basis. But the thing that struck me of wondering what it would be like, what they do, they admit people they're sick, and they find out, yes, we confirm they're positive, but they had all their vaccination, and this is what it's all about. 95% of them have been vaccinated, and they still got sick. But I I don't know if they could do it, or they certainly wouldn't want to do it because it would reveal the truth, is that what if you could find, thousands of people who, just lived through it. Maybe, I had a little cold, but I don't think I had it. It turns out that if you test them, that they actually had it, but they had natural immunity.
Yeah.
If you could find the people who had natural immunity and never really got a positive test, and then find out, what percentage of the people who have natural immunity ever get it. If the vaccine doesn't work, wouldn't they say, wow, if you have natural immunity and we tested it and we measure the antibodies, that's big deal.
Yeah.
That means, and now with an article like this, it say the vaccines aren't working anyway. They still get sick.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be revolutionary in the sense of in these last 2 years. It would mean that most of what they've done went in the wrong direction.
Well, you say they got sick, but they mostly test positive. Few of the people with Omicron actually get sick. They're rushing to the hospital because they're freaking out, because they've been terrified by the media and politicians into thinking it's much worse than it is. Well, we know now out of South Africa there was hardly an increase in hospitalizations at all with Omicron, so it's thankfully not proving as deadly. But people, they have been beat up by the media and the propagandists. But we want to talk a little bit about Fauci too, because this goes with the same theme. And this is something we've talked about for 2 years, and Fauci's admitting it.
Yeah, Fauci goes there. Finally admit the kids are not being hospitalized from COVID. And we talked about from or of,
Yeah.
and there was a small group of people, but now what Fauci's saying, is that mainstream?
Misinformation.
but this is just terrible. I think what they're doing with how they distorted this whole thing about natural immunity and doing harm and punishing people who even say it or want to discuss it, I think that's malpractice. It really is. There's a lot of people who would like to choose for medical reasons as well as freedom issues, because I want to make up my own mind whether or not I need a shot. And if that's what the person wants, he should be allowed to do it. So you have a political individual rights issue. At the same time, you have a scientific argument, and yet it marched on these last 2 years, and a lot of people ended up getting shots. But natural immunity, and there's been articles out recently. We won't get the chance to talk about all of them, but they have found out that the natural immunity is so far superior, that it's just a shame that it's become in a way outlawed, and people have lost their jobs, because they just say favorable things, and that's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think we should actually listen to Fauci say this. If we can do that second video clip from Twitter, not the first one, but the second one, the first 30 seconds of that, because I think it's important to listen to what he has to say about this while we cue it up. Here we go. Listen to this.
The other important thing is that if you look at the children who are hospitalized, many of them are hospitalized with COVID as opposed to because of COVID. And what we mean by that, if a child goes in the hospital, they automatically get tested for COVID, and they get counted as a COVID hospitalized individual. When in fact they
that's enough.
Yeah, but the death issue was the same thing too.
Yeah, but what's really important though is he's saying, hey, the kids going to the hospital, they all get tested no matter what they go in for. But as we've been saying for 2 years, that's not just true with the kids. That's true with everyone. Everyone who goes in gets tested. If they test positive, they're viewed as a positive. So basically what Fauci is saying here is that the case numbers that are coming in, as we've said all along, it's a case-demic, not a pandemic. Fauci himself essentially admits it.
Isn't it amazing the tone of Fauci on this thing? It's like, this is startling, wonderful new news, breaking news,
Yeah,
and they participate. It's the media, it's the far left, it's Fauci, it's the CDC, it's the drug companies, and they're spouting out this propaganda. But I think things are shifting. Let's hope so. That more people are getting to realize that. If Fauci is now saying something that's been said by a lot of people for a long time, and it's standard medical understanding of years, if not decades, they've understood it this way. Okay, Fauci says it's time to change the quarantine period, So we'll have to see what that happens. That means he's lightening up, but who knows what will happen tomorrow.
But we're seeing the same kind of thing also in the UK, and if we can look at that next clip here, the one from the Telegraph, it's a tweet. If we can put that up. I know we're going rapid fire because we got such a late start today. It's actually just a picture. It's a chart. It's a pink chart. I don't know if we can put that up. Now this is interesting. This is from the Telegraph. Just 1/5 of new COVID hospital patients are true cases. This is from the Telegraph, mainstream British paper. 17.4% of new admissions marked COVID are for COVID treatment. 82.6 marked COVID are incidental. For example, in the hospital for a broken bone or a heart issue, but they incidentally tested positive. Again, that's what we've been saying for 2 years, and we're being ignored or called conspiracy theorists. Now they're finally admitting it. The question is, why is the truth leaking out now after this wall of lies over 2 years? I don't know. I think maybe they're in CYA mode. Maybe they're trying to, they see what's happening. And actually, Jeff Tucker wrote a great piece last week saying that the Zoom class are getting COVID, and that's why all of a sudden it's not those dirty, unvaccinated scumbags who are getting it, because it's the people who are staying home and staying safe who are now getting Omicron. So places like the Washington Post are saying, hey, it's not so bad. Don't be so ashamed of it.
Well, that we hope we can work on and keep the momentum going in that direction. Something else in the several things that we noticed today is it's the psychological and the hysteria. It's been there for a long time, but there are a few that are just getting way out of control. I think Jeff mentioned that, Tucker, the psychological cruelty of denying natural immunity. Well, there is, and like I say, I think that's malpractice, and it's getting to be well known, and yet the whole thing is, if there was more liability responsibility, it would be a lot different. But the drug companies have been able to avoid that type of thing. They have protection by the Congress. So guess what, Daniel? I think there's benefits in the protection for the drug companies come from Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah,
Can you imagine such a thing?
There's a lot of money washing around in D.C. I think here's a good summary of the shifting narratives over the past few days. And, we've been home for the holidays, so I've just been watching it and fascinated. If we can put up this tweet by Adam Paul Laxalt, who is running for Congress, and he is a political person, but I think he's got a good summary of what's going on here. It's pretty amazing. CNN reported that cloth masks don't work. The CDC director said PCR tests are unreliable. Fauci said 10-day quarantines can be cut to 5 days now. Biden, there's no federal solution to beat COVID-19. And here's his conclusion. They are shifting the narrative just in time for the midterms. I know that would shock anyone that they might be doing it for political gain, but it also has a silver lining in that it shows they understand that the public view is shifting as well.
Now, I think things are moving in the right direction. That the distortion isn't getting worse, but it's been so bad for so long. And the old saying about people recover from this neurotic syndrome of mass psychosis, it comes slowly and tediously, and that is what we want to contribute to. I want to go on and mention this little CNN story.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
This is something else. Here's a CNN story, perfectly captures the mass COVID neuroticism of 2021. Totally delusional. Basically, there was a woman on an airplane who she couldn't have done more.
Yeah.
But what she was doing was destroying her life. She was wearing all kinds of masks, and what did she do? Ended up locking herself in the bathroom on an airplane because she got so frightened about the whole thing. She literally lost it.
She was triple vaxxed. She had a bunch of masks, a bunch of face shields. And from the point of where she arrived at the airport till the time that she freaked out and went to the bathroom, she gave herself 8 COVID tests. Negative, 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 negative. She kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it. Finally, she's on the plane and she felt a little bit sick. I wonder why. She got another one that came back positive. She flipped out and locked herself in the bathroom. And this just goes to show, I mean, it's easy to laugh at this woman, and she should be laughed at in some ways. But at the same time, she's obviously suffering, as much of the country, from severe psychological trauma. And this was discussed in now what is a famous interview. Joe Rogan interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, the founder or the discoverer of the mRNA technology that's now being used in the shots. And he talks about mass formation psychosis, which can affect a society, like you've just said, en masse. He said it happened in Germany, where everyone just wigged out over this stuff. And he says it's happening here in the U.S. I think that's what we're seeing.
Yes, and I think this psychosis is worse than any of the infections, even when the COVID was more realistic. But these variants, they would be minimal, but the psychosis is very, very serious. And we've been talking about, and a lot of other people have been talking about, what it's done to a whole generation of children.
Yeah.
And they've been more susceptible, but here the adults are falling apart too. And I guess this fear, if it's turned inward, they get hysterical and they don't know how to handle it. But others will just endorse whatever the government says,
Yeah.
and they become zombies. And of course, if you look at that in a sense of how the challenge to liberty occurs, people terrorize the government officials that terrorize the people, say for foreign policy reasons.
Yeah.
The Russians are coming, and also this COVID thing has been used there. And what has happened these last 2 years? There's been a diminishing of liberty and an increase in the size of government. The budget has goes totally wide. And then we hear every once in a while we're supposed to spit out a few tidbits of optimism. But I do believe that it's conceivable that people will wake up and they must. I just hope and pray that the hysteria doesn't lead to the endorsement of fascism and communism that occurred in the 20th century. But right now, this endorsement is the endorsement of a form of fascism, and that's what people have to come to understand.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to close, Dr. Paul, really quickly. I want to thank everyone who stood up. We sent out some solicitations for some contributions, end-of-year contributions to Ron Paul Institute. Thank all of you so much who contributed. It was successful. We'll be able to go on for a while. The last thing on it, because you're talking about silver lining, you're talking about optimism, Dr. Paul, and I think that the Rogan-Malone interview is a sign of optimism. It had more views than all of CNN, all of MSNBC, and I think all of Fox put together. That's how many people went to see someone who they tried to cancel. They tried to cancel Malone because of what he was saying about the vaccine. The guy is the most qualified person probably in the world to talk about it. And as he said, I may be wrong, I may be right, but you shouldn't be frozen out of the debate. So the fact that so many people flocked to this interview of Joe Rogan and Malone is a good sign. And I think I at least feel a little bit of encouragement going into the new year.
Yeah, and I think so. And I, from the very beginning of the coming of the internet, I was always optimistic, even though I didn't understand the mechanism of how it worked. I said there will always be somebody, if there's a bit of freedom left, that are able to use this freedom to spread the message. And things got pretty bad, but at least Malone hasn't been rushed off to prison. We've had a few whistleblowers that happens because they're not allowed to tell the truth about some of our policies. But the fact that he got this out, it's almost a badge of honor. And it's very impressive that people want to hear him. And he's saying everything opposite of the propaganda of 3 years, essentially. And a challenge to the medical profession. Boy, there's been some stories out not only about the seriousness, psychological seriousness, but also the damage done to a generation of young people, but the damage done to the medical profession. I see this in a personal fashion, and it has been so destructive, and so many MDs have rolled over, the very large percentage, but they all depend on it. There's a new move on what Biden wants to do is share, revenue sharing with the doctors who capitulate and do their government propaganda in their office. They'll get a certain percentage of their charges for Medicare, and then of course they'll make more money. And then all of a sudden, someday they will lose their liberties. Which, when you sign up for programs like that, you do that at the sacrifice of your liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.